All right, welcome back to the Gun Culture Radio Show. And this time I've got for the first time, I have other than Dad, I have another YouTuber on, and that's the Hoss USMC.
Hello.
So USMC, is that a college or something that you went to, or what is that in the
the
name?
the College of Pain and Suffering.
Oh, okay, okay.
That's the United States Marine Corps.
Oh,
So
that's what that is. Okay. No,
yeah.
that's cool. Yeah, one thing I was gonna ask you is like, how how do you see the distinction between? Because I know you do like a lot of training and stuff like that. Because you're not in the military anymore, right?
No,
You're
I'm
out
not.
now. Yeah. And I know you do a lot of training just as a civilian now. And I was going to ask you, how does
Mhm.
that the training compare? Would you say as far as is the between when you were in the Marines and now as a civilian, is your mindset different? Is it a lot less intense, or just like how would you compare the two?
Right. Well, as a civilian, you have to determine like what sort of training do you need
Right.
and what sort of training do you want, and try to find a happy medium in there. And for me, my the way that I see myself employing the firearm in my life is in the realm of like an everyday defensive carry, and from thugs and criminals or whatever.
Right.
And then in um, the second, or maybe it's the first most important one is that I'm able to employ firearms in use of small unit tactics in the context of a civilian defender, and that's something that's different than the context of, say, a military force or a civilian contractor, where you have more
Support.
logistics
Right.
available to you.
All right.
And so it's kind of like, how important is it to you as a civilian, or me as a civilian, to be well trained in those things in that context.
Right.
So yeah, I found so far most of the training that I've sought out and got as a civilian is actually better than most of the training I received in the military, as far as like using the firearms and employing them. There's not a whole lot of training that's out there for people in the context of a civilian defender. Most people are just kind of getting together with their buddies and going over this stuff,
Right.
like building a defensive position or something like that. And honestly, it's a bit of a travesty because, I mean, as Americans, we have the Second Amendment, which clearly outlines our right to defend ourselves and our right to gather and train as a militia
Yep.
or as a group of civilians who want to defend their community. And very few of us actually do that. Very few of us actually get together with our friends and neighbors and make a plan to protect our neighborhood
Yeah.
or our communities.
Right, and it's a shame, and I'll be honest, like I'm guilty of this. I've never taken any training classes or anything like that, and that's something I'd like to change in the future. But I think that one of the main causes for this is because firearms they're so under scrutiny. That's changing now for the better, I think. But especially in the
Yeah.
past 20 years, especially, people who have guns were so afraid to tell other people that we have guns just because
Yeah.
they're so under scrutiny. So getting together with neighbors or getting to know other people that are into guns to organize something like that is just it's just hard, especially in the past, especially in the 90s.
Right.
Man, I mean,
Well,
uh,
that is true. That's definitely true. And I think it's also part of just the way that our society has gone over the last 50, 60, 70 years. I mean, after
yeah,
World War II, the baby boomers they had just fought a horrible giant war and they wanted to live in peace. And so they didn't really think about it. And then we kind of went into the whole flower child peace time of the 60s and 70s. Then militias kind of got a bad rap in the 80s. And so it was kind of like this progressively getting worse thing. But now as people are becoming more aware of their rights as Americans and sovereign free people of the United States, they're becoming more aware that we're lacking these things. One of which is is a healthy respect for firearms,
Right.
like you say.
Yeah. It's really changing fast. I mean, it's really awesome. A great example is suppressors. I mean,
Yeah.
who had a suppress? I mean, unless you were really a gun guy, 10 years ago, who had a suppressor? I mean, like nobody. But you go into gun shops and they're everywhere now. Everybody is interested in them, and nothing has changed. They're just as hard to get as they were before. Just so many more people know about them or being made aware of what's out there and what they can do. And that's the same thing as with the militias.
The American Suppressor Association, which was partially started by Silencer Co., has been doing a really good job at getting out there and defending our rights to own these things on the state level particularly, and also to bring awareness that you can purchase them and buy them, and that a suppressor is literally a safety device. That's what it's for.
Right. Yeah.
and trying to change a mindset on it. It's not a bunch of ninjas running around in black pajamas with silencers.
Yeah, like assassinating people or something. It's just crazy. I mean, you got that movie image, associated with those things, where people think that, gangsters are out there using suppressors, and I mean, that doesn't really happen. I mean, I worked in law enforcement for just a little while. I did like armed security in some really bad neighborhoods and stuff. So I had a little bit of exposure to kind of like, at least, sort of what that's like, to an extent, and got to know some of the local law enforcement around there and stuff like that. And by and large, the kinds of guns and that are used in crimes, usually junk, just like random stuff that they can find. Some old Jennings, 32 auto, or or like a old High Point or something like that. Just old junk like that. People they're not using suppressors. I mean, that just doesn't happen really. If a guy is the kind of level of criminal that is going to use a suppressor and need its tactical advantage, he's going to get you either way. You know what I'm saying? If he doesn't have a suppressor, he's going to figure out another way to get you,
Right. Absolutely.
So it's like, that level of criminal is really not something the average person has to worry about, unless you're involved in things you shouldn't be involved in. You don't have to worry about that guy, You just don't.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah, the contract killer's not after the average Joe.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's crazy, but it's awesome that is changing. Just like, back to what we were talking about with the militias. Again, they were very successful, prior to the internet, at making militias look like extremists, anti-establishment groups. I mean, which in a way, it's more like counter and establishment, sort of in a sense. It's more of a check against the establishment, but they tried to paint that picture that they were looking to undermine the existing establishment as almost like enemies of the state, and
right.
That
I've done
image
a
is
lot
changing.
of traveling over the last 5 years or so, and met up with various militia groups that just happened to be in places where I was at, and
Right.
I was shocked personally at I grew up, listening to the news media, and I was shocked at the militia groups that I ran into. The vast majority of them were all just the most excellent people, and very kind and giving, and really helpful and amazing people. And it totally changed my mindset on it, which is why part of the reason why I'm producing a documentary right now on the American militia.
Oh, that's cool.
Something that I'd like people to look at that concept and re-own it and say, this is part of our birthright as Americans, is to be defenders of this nation.
Yeah, it's a big part of it's half of the Second Amendment. Yeah,
absolutely.
It's important, and the thing is too, it makes sense that I'm sure, as with anything, there's always going to be a negative example. So I'm sure there are some militias out there that are bad, but by and large, they're going to be good and full of good people, because just some dumb, ignorant redneck isn't going to be able to put that many people together and organize like that and train and have the discipline and do all that kind of stuff. They try to make it sound like it's just a bunch of rednecks just, we're all getting drunk one day. Oh, let's form an army. It's a
Yeah.
little more sophisticated than that. That's the thing.
Yeah. Well, I'd also argue that there's a difference between a bunch of gun buddies. It would be, I guess, one kind of thing that someone might consider a militia, or an armed political group, like a group that's politically motivated and they're armed and upset and angry, and a real militia, which is an apolitical group. The whole purpose of the militia is to defend your community from whatever may arise, whatever that is.
Right.
Not a politically driven thing necessarily.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And I love the idea of things being more privatized in that sense, because from when I worked security, one of the things that I saw was that the police first of all, police definitely can't get to your house in time if you need help, but they can't even get into certain communities, to even just keep watch on them. I mean, there's communities around Nashville that it's basically like the Wild West. There's actually this one area in Nashville that it's nicknamed Dodge City. And every town has something like this. But literally, like, they won't go there. It's that bad. Like, cops will not go there unless they absolutely have to. And there's lots of places like that. And one of the ones I worked at wasn't quite that bad, but it was kind of a mid-level, something like that. And the thing that I found was that security was almost the only way to actually tame some of these areas. And I mean, it would be great. I've always thought that would be a great thing to see more just private citizens, not actual law enforcement, kind of watching their own, taking care of their own, watching their own communities, kind of like a neighborhood watch program, but something a little more serious.
Right.
Because I don't know, something has to change when it comes to that, because police are really, they got their back against the wall. I mean, the job that they're being asked to do and the way that they're being asked to do it is almost impossible. It really is.
Yeah, absolutely. That's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, it's crazy. But we won't get into that, I guess. But one of the things that it's talking about the whole training thing. There's some people out there. Typically, this is an idea that's kind of shared by the anti-gun community, is that there needs to be some type of mandatory training requirement to even own a gun, or especially to have a carry permit. You have to meet some sort of level, and I think most of us that like guns, we see a problem with that, because if it's a fundamental right for us to be able to protect ourselves, then how can that really be exercised if there's some type of there's some type of process or something there's some kind of requirement that we have to meet to then get that? That then it's not really a right, is it?
Right. Well, I tell people all the time, we either live in a free nation or we don't. There's
right.
no middle ground. It's not like you can have a little bit of tyranny.
Yeah, doesn't work that way.
It's either there or it's not.
Yep.
And if I have one hand nailed to the wall instead of two, I still have a hand nailed to the wall.
Yeah, that's a good point.
This is a nation of free people, and we have laws in place to restrict government and tell them what they're allowed to regulate. Yet they've surpassed that through backdoor deals and things like, I'm trying to think of the word here, judges who use case law to change fundamentally what our nation is about and
right.
what we're allowed to do as citizens, which is pretty concerning.
Right.
But yeah, there's absolutely, if we're going to be free and we really are going to have a system where people are free, then we can't require people to do things. Like I don't think we should have, personally, and I know that a lot of people would disagree with me, but I don't think we should get licenses to practice law. I don't think we should have to get licenses to become a plumber, which I used to be a plumber. I don't think that we should have to get licenses to drive a car.
Right.
We either have a right to do it or we don't. And part of having rights and freedoms is that we're not as secure as people that are suppressed and people that are required to comply with all these things.
Yeah, exactly.
That's just the nature of freedom, is that you're not necessarily as secure as you might feel comfortable being growing up in a society where we have been restricted heavily.
Right, and all these systems that are in place, not just with guns, they make life so complicated. They make it so hard to just live your life. You have to worry about all these things like permits and licenses and there's regulations I have to watch out for. Some regulations obviously they need to be in place because we want our society to be relatively safe. But I do agree with you though. Yeah.
Well, obviously, like if you're a person that's looking for a doctor or a lawyer,
right,
or you want to drive a car, you're probably going to look for someone that has training as a doctor or a lawyer, or you're going to get training to drive a car.
Yeah.
Because that's the smart thing to do. And it's the same thing with firearms. If you're going to carry a firearm, you're probably going to seek out training because it's the smart thing to do.
Right.
If you're carrying a firearm around and expecting it to be a magic talisman, then I would question your sense of reality.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, there would be private organizations with guns. It's a little different, but when it comes to driving or like a plumber or hiring a lawyer or whatever it is, there could be private organizations to vet lawyers. You shouldn't, if you want to take a gamble on some guy, if you think that your brother-in-law would make the best lawyer ever and he's never studied law a day in his life, then you should be able to hire him to be your lawyer if you want to. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah, you should be able to make that mistake. Yeah. And when it comes to guns, it's a little bit different because if someone's carrying a gun, they can be reckless to the public. If someone shows that if they've done something reckless, there's laws in place to take care of that. Is the thing. There's always been laws in place for that.
Well, it's what I refer to as a self-correcting problem.
Right.
If you're going to be crazy and reckless with a firearm, then you're either going to break a law and go to jail, or someone else is going to shoot you. So.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing.
And like I said, that's part of the danger that comes with freedom.
Yeah.
And I personally prefer freedom. It's kind of a radical view in today's world, but it's historically an American value.
Right. And it should be shared by everybody in the world. That's the thing. It's just, it's not just America. I mean, every living, person or thing on this planet should pursue freedom. Freedom should be more important than safety. I don't get that. If the point of life was to be safe and to live as long as we could, then we're going about it all wrong. We need to all live in concrete dwellings, like underground, and like eat some kind of green, like nutrient paste, and not be like not watch any TV programs that are too exciting or anything like that.
Yeah, well, one thing that's interesting is, my dad is a medical professional who works in a hospital. He's worked in hospitals almost his whole adult life.
Yeah. And
I was looking at these statistics, and over 100,000 people a year, I believe this is correct, over 100,000 people a year die in hospitals due to negligence, whether it's from an unclean hospital or a nurse not washing their hands or a surgeon or whatever. And I thought, man, that is a really high number.
Yeah, it really is.
And I think it's really funny how people in the anti-gun crowd, they make these things saying, well, it's so unsafe, it's so many people are dying from guns every year, and then you take the number of people that you from everything, including suicides. Even if you include suicide, that number is like really, really low compared to car accidents and heart disease and negligence in hospitals and all these things. And it's just strange how passionate some of these anti-gun people are about guns and they're so hypocritical because they really don't care about people that are they're not anywhere near as passionate about people that are dying from heart disease or dying in car crashes. I don't see protests for more car safety.
Yeah, and anyone who has any sense realizes that death is death. An injury is an injury. It's the same. It doesn't matter what caused it. What's the difference between dying because a doctor used a dirty scalpel surgery and you get an infection and die from it versus getting shot and dying? There's no difference. You're still dead. So like the only reason I can think of is why that they would focus so much on the people who are dying from guns, which, as you explained, and there's lots of stats out there to prove that, is not at all one of the leading causes of people dying. Not even close. Yes. The only reason that they would focus on that is because they don't like the fact that people have guns. I mean, that's the only thing that makes sense. Well,
yeah. One of the things that people say a lot around is that gun control is not about guns. It's about control.
Right.
And ultimately, if you think about the one thing that recently there was a senator in Connecticut who was saying that anybody who owns a magazine over 10 rounds, their intent is to be arming against the government. And I wrote a blog post on my blog actually saying, "Yep, you're exactly right." The whole point of having guns is that you should be afraid of them.
Yeah.
That's exactly why we have them.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, guns should be feared in the sense that, excuse me, I dropped my phone there.
It's all good.
Guns should be feared in the sense that free men should have them as tools to ensure freedom,
right?
Or as weapons to ensure freedom,
right?
So yeah, they are worth fearing, but in the correct context, I think.
Right, exactly, and and the thing is, what's that other quote where it's like an armed society is a polite society? That's one of the cliches that I kind of agree with because, the odds need to be evened. That's kind of what the Second Amendment is about. That's what a lot of the Constitution is about a balance of power, and that's to me is kind of the main gist of the Second Amendment is balance of power to the people, and ultimately, weapons are the only actual power that anyone has over anyone else when you really think about it. Because laws, structures, pages and pages of regulations, none of that stuff does anything without being backed up by weapons of some kind. So that's the balance. And
one of there was a famous philosopher that said that political power comes at the barrel of a gun. And I agree with that. I think that if people study our founding documents, the Federalist Papers and the Anti-Federalist Papers, and things, that you'll see that it was intended that the armed people of this nation, were to be essentially the fourth branch of government.
Right.
If you read our Constitution, it's a list, basically. It's a list of restrictions against the government, saying you could do this, and you could do this, and you could do this, but that's about it.
Yeah.
And the whole point of the Second Amendment was that if they decide to do more than that, then it's our responsibility to hold them accountable using whatever force necessary. And that was part of our job as free citizens of this nation, was to do that. And we have essentially failed to do that since the Civil War. So
right.
that's kind of disturbing, actually.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and basically, what it seems like is the founding fathers basically they seem to kind of see that setting up a system of government was basically the easy part. Like that had been accomplished for thousands of years. They basically they knew that was the easy part. The problem is the stuff that the government does after that. So they were more concerned with what government can't do more so than what government can do, because they understood that was the problem right there. It wasn't setting
Right.
up a structure to where things would run right. It was keeping the government from getting too powerful and trying to do too much. And
I think a lot of things that I hear from people is, we're allowed to do that. And I say, you're asking the wrong question. What you should be saying is, why are we not allowed to do that? Because we are one of the first nations in history that set up a system where everything is allowed. We don't make laws to grant privileges and rights to people. We make laws to restrict rights and privileges to people.
right,
So, like, if people say, "Well, is this an open carry state? Is this a blah 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 state?" Well, like, if you look at a state like Vermont, they've never made a law against concealed carry. So that's the way that our laws work here. Is that in Vermont, yes, it's legal to carry a weapon concealed without a license because they never made a law against it.
right, yeah, and I wish it was like that in every state. Maybe one day, but
Yeah.
I support the right of private businesses for saying they don't want people to carry guns in there because we don't have to go there.
Right, yeah.
That's
private business. They should be able to do what they want to do.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. When it comes to federal buildings and stuff like that, that's kind of a gray area because, there's some places like even post offices, I think in most states you're not allowed to carry. And
Right.
That's definitely a place where you would want to carry. I mean, there's other people in there, it's just as dangerous as anywhere else. Yeah. But federal buildings, it's like if they're searching everyone that comes in, and okay, I can see that. I mean, because if you search absolutely everyone that comes in and you have armed security guards, it's a relatively safe environment. Still, something could happen. Somebody could bust in there and try to shoot up the place, but it's less likely at least.
I would argue that maybe the most dangerous place in the world is a federal building because it's full of feds.
It's right. Yeah, exactly. Dangerous for people like us.
But it is really, places of business like that generally are pretty safe. An office building, whether it's a government office or not,
right,
is generally not a place where you need a firearm. But it's that's the thing is like you're playing the odds when you carry a firearm. The whole point is not that you're worried about everywhere you go,
right?
But that you never know where evil will strike.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly. And one thing that kills me, if the cool thing, if more people did carry guns, let's say if it was even like half of everyone or 60% of everyone carried guns, the thing that would be so awesome about it is because you could relax more, because like if you wanted to, the thing I hate is if you go, if I want to go like to a bar, if I want to go to a restaurant, especially a restaurant where if I'm going to drink beer, I'll decide, okay, am I going to carry my gun or am I going to drink beer,
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes beer wins, but like, it'd be nice to know that, that's not really that much of a risk because odds are there's somebody in there, which in Tennessee, that very well may be the case. But we kind of, we take care of each other in that sense because there's certain times where maybe you don't want to have a gun because you're going to be out, downtown drinking or whatever you're going to do. And, you like to think that there's other civilians there to kind of back you up, I like that idea.
Everywhere I go, I carry at least 2 guns. So
yeah.
So if you're with me, you can count on me to toss you one.
Okay. All right, cool. What I do is I've got a 380. It's a P380 car that I carry in my pocket, and it's always in my right pocket. If I'm wearing pants, it's there. Unless I'm going into a place that it's prohibited. And the way I kind of do it is I always have that, and then I carry my either my 26 or my XDS 9, something like that. Like I put a gun, I'll actually go to the holster. Occasionally, I kind of go about half and half. Sometimes I'll carry a bigger gun in a holster on the belt, and sometimes I'll just stick with my 380. But that's just kind of how I do it because sometimes a 380 7 shots not ideal, but I like to be comfortable. You know what I mean? So it's kind of a balance. But the 380 I always have. So I'll either just have 2 guns or 1 gun. That's kind of how I do it usually.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I carry a 38 Smith & Wesson 38 revolver in my waist band, and a Glock 19, and so I always have those two on me.
Yeah.
At all times.
Can't go wrong with the Glock 19, man. That's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great gun.
Yeah.
I like the 26 too. I got that recently. It's I find it a little bit easier, to like not print and stuff. But
yeah, I was impressed. My roommate just bought a 26, and I've never fired one before. And I was impressed with the little thing. It's something that it's now in my realm of possibilities of picking one up. So
yeah, they're cool. I found that they're not as comfortable to shoot as the 19 because of the grip being smaller, but I found that I shoot it, basically as well. Even though I don't enjoy it as much, I do shoot it about as well. So, so for carry, it definitely will do the trick. But one thing too that this has kind of been an ongoing discussion that I've kind of had on these shows is where's the red line of gun control? If us gun people, if we had total control over the gun laws in this country or the world for that matter, where would we put that line? And this time I kind of want to take money out of it. Let's say that everything from a sharp stick to a nuclear bomb is reasonably affordable, for basically everyone. What should we allow the public to have? It's a tough one.
That's a good question. I'd be hesitant to say anything in that context because I would be hesitant to say anything. But if I had to draw a line in that context, I'd probably draw it at what we would describe as weapons of mass destruction, or for me, chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons would be where I would have to draw that line personally. Right. In that context, that anybody can get access to them.
Right. See, I would put it. I think my line would probably be a little bit different. I would say any type of small arms, totally fine, absolutely no restrictions whatsoever. I don't care how big it is. If it's if it shoots bullets, fully automatic, it doesn't matter. You can buy it, no problem. Doesn't matter how short it is, or stock, barrel, none of that stuff matters. But when it comes to explosive devices, I do think that the public should have access to that stuff. But because guns are dangerous in a different way than a frag grenade is. You know what I'm saying? Because a gun, if you have any understanding, first of all, a gun is obviously not dangerous if it's just sitting on the ground. It's not possible of doing anything unless somehow the temperature reached to a point where a round could cook off or something in the chamber. And that's like the most unbelievable long shot ever. But something like a grenade, it could go off maybe if it was faulty or if there was some kind of problem. I mean, you would know much better than I do, but basically explosives could blow up on their own if there's some kind of weird, a signal that messes with it, or a static electricity.
The only way that's going to happen is that, just for the context, people understand where I'm coming from on this. I was an explosives engineer in the Marine Corps.
Okay.
The only way that an explosive is going to go off on its own is if you primed it with some sort of electrical primer, or if there was some sort of synthetic detonation, which is essentially what a primer is.
Right.
It's a small explosion that sets off the larger explosion. Modern high explosives are very stable, and even dynamite today you could toss it across the room and it's not going to go off. What's in a hand grenade is what's known as composition B, which is it's a composition of different materials, but it's very, very stable. I would say that.
So that's not really a concern with explosives and really going off by accident. Then.
Right. You would have to prime it first with something. One of the things that we do is ensure that our electrical blasting caps are in a static electrical case that protects from static electricity when we were in the military, because helicopters can actually set off the primers. It's been known to happen. It's not common, but they can set off electrical primers and things like that. But
Well, based on that, so I over exaggerated with the unstableness then of explosives, but based on that, the fact that explosives have an indiscriminate property to them, to where
it depends on where you put them, right?
Oh yeah, exactly, it does. No, I totally agree, but I could see
it takes intent.
Do what?
It takes intent.
Oh yeah, it does. Yeah,
you have to intentionally throw a grenade at someone, or
right.
intentionally put a pile of dynamite under somebody's house.
Right? No, yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, by itself, it's not gonna be more dangerous than a gun, really, by itself. But it's explosives. It seems like to me, at least, to operate them responsibly would require some knowledge and know-how beyond what you would really be expected when it comes to just firearms. So I could see some type of regulations when it comes to that, for explosives. And you can actually get any kind of explosives you want. It just takes a lot. It takes a lot of hoops to jump through it, to get that.
Well, think about this: if you pull a guy out of the Amazon jungle who has never seen a plane before,
right,
and you hand him a handgun and he shoots himself in the face, or you hand him a grenade and he pulls the pin and blows himself up,
yeah, same.
The guy is still dead.
Right.
Yeah. It's not like he still had no training in either of them and didn't know what he was doing.
Right.
I would say that just because something's more difficult to understand doesn't mean that it should necessarily be more regulated.
Yeah.
Personally, that's what I would say.
Right. But I do think that there's a level, though, where, like, let's say if you can walk into a store and buy, like an RPG or something like that, and it's pretty affordable. It's like a couple $100. You go in there and buy one, no problem. I do think that it would be more likely for them to be used. I mean, there's organizations and gangs out there that they would buy them and they would use them. They blow up houses with them and stuff like that. Like that, I think that would happen more if that was something that you could just walk into a shop and buy that was fairly affordable.
Right. If you look at societies where corruption is higher or organized crime runs more freely, like say northern Mexico, for instance, where people are having their heads cut off, things like that. The gangs there have access to all that stuff, and that's not a problem that we see going on. Mostly because they know that if they take it to that level, it's going to incur the wrath of the government more so than they already are.
Right.
Yeah, but I think that for me, if I were able to write the law right away, right now, I would draw the line at the what we refer to as NBC, or nuclear, biological, and chemical, because the whole point of owning firearms, in my opinion, is to show the government, to say, we hold all the tools of war, all the weapons of war, we have them, and we're willing to use them. But you better watch what you do. And that's the whole point, in my opinion, of the Second Amendment, is that we are able to have all the weapons of war that are available in their current form. When the British were coming to Lexington to confiscate firearms, they were coming to confiscate cannons, muskets involved, but they were coming for cannons too. And in that day, your average man didn't have a cannon. That's literally a weapon of war in that time. It would be like having artillery in your barn.
Yeah, that's true. It's a good point.
So the idea to me is that if we had a city like say the Tri-Cities area, which in Washington City, Washington State, if they had an area in the city where a couple of guys got together and they decided they were going to form a tank platoon. And they bought 6 tanks and a tank recovery vehicle, and they got them all together and they trained with them. And there was another area in the town where they decided they were going to be artillery guys, so they bought some howitzers and they got them together and they trained with them and everything. That's how I foresee like the intent of the founders, was that we would have those types of things in a city like Boston. There would be, groups of men going around that trained with cannon and things like that.
Right. So more, maybe there could be like a distinction then, let's say, between personal defense weapons and collective defense weapons. Let's say like, your average person, they can walk into a store and buy anything that would be considered, personal, like basically like firearms, machine guns, submachine guns, whatever, any of that kind of stuff. But maybe even grenades, but maybe for like the more serious stuff like artillery and tanks or helicopters or aircraft carriers, stuff that's a little more serious. You have to be, it can be purchased by an organization and not an individual, maybe. And that's you have militias for that or something.
Part of the point of America is that we have individual freedom,
right?
And that we're individuals, and that we don't have to subscribe to a group like, say, the Roman Catholic Church to be able to participate or to be part of a privileged class where we have this or that thing available to us, whether it's salvation in the case of Roman Catholics or some sort of access to something,
right?
Whether it's a service or a physical item. I would say that I'm not opposed necessarily to there being some sort of system where we can check on people to make sure that they're not insane.
Right.
I'm okay with that, but the one stipulation would be for me that these records of who owns what would have to be immediately destroyed. There should be no record of
right.
who has what.
Right.
I mean, the whole idea of America was that we were free to pursue our lives and our happiness and take our property and pursue that life with our property.
Yep.
And that we didn't have to ask permission to do things. And
right.
that was part of the greatness of America. And sure, artillery is dangerous. It's used for killing lots of people. And that's exactly why I would want it, is because someday I might want to use artillery on someone that's trying to hurt me.
Right. Yeah, and I definitely get that, because I mean, back in the day, cannons was basically about the biggest weapons that we had, the people had cannons. If we hadn't had cannons back then, we might not have been. We wouldn't have been able to really do much in the Revolutionary War. We had to have cannons. I mean, if you didn't have cannons, you're screwed basically. So I get that, and artillery or tanks, stuff like that. It's like modern day cannons to an extent, but I do think that there's a balance there because the explosion of technology does make a difference to a certain extent. Like we both definitely agree that chemical warfare and nuclear weapons and stuff like that is definitely not something that the average person should have their hands on, because the technology it's just too much. It's too far beyond what a normal person, what one person should be able to control basically. So I think there's a balance there when it comes to certain weapons that are capable of taking out, I mean, really with some artillery, you could take out a small town, with it, and
right.
If a crazy person got behind it, we could get them, but a whole town just got destroyed, so there, there's definitely a balance there somewhere, I think, but
right.
You're right though. We don't want the government knowing what we have. That's important. It's an important part of it.
Yeah, It's none of the government's business what I have at my house.
Yeah. No,
it's
not.
The whole point of the government, that when it was formed, our government or any government,
Right.
is to ensure that our freedoms and our properties are protected. That's it.
Right.
That's their sole purpose, is to ensure that we remain free and that nobody takes our property. And
Right.
when the government starts getting out of that business and they start getting into other businesses like making money or doing things like dictating how you should live your life or saying what you have to own or things like that,
Enforcing
then it's
culture.
no longer it's no longer there for the benefit of the people. It's there for the benefit of itself.
Right.
And that's when it no longer is a government for the people.
Right. Because really, I mean, the whole point of society is so that we can organize ourselves and work together to achieve more things than we could if we just lived by ourselves in the woods, and
or to just live in peace, which
right.
is what I want.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I just don't want people to kill me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, me either. But I think that that society ultimately is a good thing, because without society, then we aren't capable of developing technology that allows us to one day maybe travel to other planets or to make our lives easier, because if we I mean, it's kind of nice to be able to go to the grocery store and buy some steaks or some chicken, and not have to go hunting all day, it's kind of nice. So there's definitely some good things to it. But the challenge is just, how do you do that and still restore, people's freedom, And,
well, absolutely. And neither you or I are professional political philosophers, but,
no.
I think that we can have a good idea about what we want in our lives, and what we want, at least what I want, is the maximum amount of freedom.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And it all comes down to that balance, man, of just freedom and safety. A little bit of safety and a whole lot of freedom. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, it's about the quality of life. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's my thing. That's why, like, sometimes I don't worry. I might just go out and only have my 380. Because I'm concerned with my quality of life. I want to reasonably be able to protect myself. If I choose to, I want to have the ability to have everything that I might possibly need to protect myself. But I might choose not to always have that with me, because, I have some, want to have some balance in your life. That's the way I look at it, at least. But, yeah, and one thing too with the one of the other things I had written down was the political correctness. When it comes to pro-gun, anti-gun, all that kind of stuff. And one of the big words that has been very controversial is the term assault rifle. And I watched one of your videos on that, and I thought you did an amazing job just breaking down that and the history of where the term comes from and all that. And it was really nice because a lot of the stuff that I had watched, people talked about that term. I didn't really like a lot of it because it was just too, like, either it's a totally ridiculous, inaccurate term, or they thought it wasn't a problem. Like, I liked where you were kind of in the middle on it.
The term itself is not necessarily based in the same context that it's used today.
Right. Exactly.
So I think people confuse the issue with it. The whole point of weapons is that they're deadly.
Exactly. And, they are weapons.
Yeah, that's the whole point. That's why I have them.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if they, one day they'll come out with guns that shoot lasers or something, and I'll own those instead. But
yeah,
as of right now, this is the best thing that we got.
Yeah,
is the weapon itself, an assault rifle. For those of people that don't understand what the term actually means, it was born out of an earlier era primarily post World War II or right around World War II. And the term refers to a select fire weapon, meaning they can shoot in the semi-automatic, where you pull the trigger once, fires one bullet, or you can choose to select a different mode where it shoots all the bullets until you stop pulling, until you take your finger off the trigger.
Right.
And that's again, getting back to the tools and weapons of war. I absolutely think that those should be available to the general public.
Definitely. I wanted to say there's one area on that I maybe differ from you a little bit, is because I know that's, something that gets talked about a lot is, like the difference between like an M16 and full auto is a lot of an assault rifle, and AR-15, is not. The way I look at it was the assault rifle was developed, from what I understand, it was basically like the Sturmgewehr that was developed by the Nazis, and Hitler called it. And I think Hitler's the one that named it, and it basically Sturmgewehr means storm rifle, assault rifle, basically. And the logic behind it, based on my understanding, was that they wanted a kind of an intermediary between a subgun and a battle rifle, and they wanted something that fired a medium-powered cartridge that was capable of having the capacity that you had with a submachine gun. So basically, they wanted a beefier submachine gun in a lot of ways, what it seems like to me. And so the way I look at it, at least, is that that's what assault rifle is. So based on the original conception of that term, an AR-15, an AK-47, it is technically an assault rifle because it follows that same principle of I hate to use the word high capacity, but a higher capacity rifle that fires a mediary.
Right. Well, higher than your average battle rifle of the era, which
right, exactly.
Five or 4 or 8 rounds, depending on which country you're from.
Right, exactly. So I look at that as kind of, and full auto was part of that, but full auto to me was kind of like, that was just kind of the like, why not part of it? Because we can, so why wouldn't we? So so that's one thing that maybe I don't know how you like feel about that, but I feel like all of these guns are technically assault rifles, whether they're full auto or not. And of course, the fact that we can't have full auto is ridiculous, and the only reason that's even considered a different, it's even considered a distinction in the type of gun or weapon is because of the legality and not the actual mechanics of it.
Well, getting back to the name, I guess when the design was originally made, the term assault rifle didn't necessarily mean the action that you were supposed to use with it.
Right.
And I think a lot of people today would like to assume that or try to further the idea that an assault rifle is to be used for assaulting people or assaulting things only. It was more like, hey, this sounds like a cool name.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
A battle rifle, which is a totally different thing, is I guess it's not totally different. It just means it uses a different cartridge. It's just a way to classify a weapon.
Right.
It's a term, and that's not. It's not necessarily a thing to have an assault rifle. And to be honest, I could think of multiple situations in which I may desire to have a select fire assault rifle in my hands. I keep an AR-15 in the trunk of my car everywhere I go.
Yeah.
And I probably don't need it. I'll probably never need it. But the day that I do need it, I'm going to be really happy that I have it.
Oh, yeah, that's for sure.
And then that's something that I need to stop caring about what people think about us and saying, I'm going to pursue my life and my freedoms the way that I see fit. And if that upsets you, then
that's your problem.
Yeah, that's not my problem. And it's not like I hate that person or or whatever. It's just that, I can't be concerned about everybody's feelings everywhere I go and tiptoeing through the tulips with everyone.
Right.
It's just, that's not the kind of world I want to live in. And if my life offends you, I can't stop you from being offended, and there's nothing I can do to stop that because I'm going to continue to do what I want to do,
Right.
which is pursue my freedom.
Yeah, and that's one thing I talk about too some on the shows. The first step of freedom is it starts with your mind, not some type of system of government that says you can or can't do certain things. Freedom is all about making your own genuine decisions. And sometimes in life we don't make genuine decisions, and we think we are, but we're not, because of deception from the media and just different propaganda and all this kind of stuff, and that's ultimately what it comes down to. Definitely not advocating breaking any laws or anything like that, but I'm just saying freedom is everyone can be free in their own mind.
Right.
That's
well, that's something that I think a lot of people will look at us and say, well, on one hand, you're saying don't break the law, but on the other hand, you're saying you should have guns because someday you may actually want to break the laws.
Yeah, it seems contradictory almost, but yeah.
Right. The distinction is that a really amazing man that I've had a good time that I've been, I guess, fortunate to read about is Dr. Martin Luther King. And if you look at some of the things that he wrote, one of the things that he said was that it's a moral obligation for us to follow a just law. And conversely, it's a moral obligation for us to not follow an unjust law.
Yeah, that's a great quote.
Because compliance, I forget how the quote exactly goes, but compliance with evil is just as much as you're basically participating by being apathetic.
Right.
I'm sorry, I can't remember the quote, but
a good example of that is the whole Nazis in the concentration camps.
Right.
They were involved in a government that seemed it was very powerful, and they were told to do a certain thing, and they did that thing, which was what was acceptable within that system. But then once that system fell apart, look what happened to them. They got tracked down, hung, or hanged, and some of them killed, and in prison for the rest of their life. So you ultimately, regardless of what the system that you live under at a specific time, you have to ultimately base your decisions on your own personal morals of what is right.
Right, and I think that it's if you look at the Holocaust, the murdering of millions of Jews, that was a legal action within that state at that time.
What does that tell you? Yeah.
The millions of people that were murdered in communist Russia, those were legal acts that happened.
Yep.
Those were all legal things, and so for us as individuals, as people that are sovereign, and we choose what our own morality, we say, well, I'm not going to participate in that. I think that is wrong, and I won't get into some other things that are touchy subjects, but I choose to abstain from lots of things here in America that even though we may have the freedom to do them, or I don't necessarily find them moral.
Right.
And so I don't participate in those things.
Right. Just because it's legal, it doesn't mean that it's right or it's a good thing.
Absolutely. So there's definitely a point at which I think you can look at a law and say this is a bad law.
Right. Yeah. It's just crazy.
In fact, an example that I like to use often is in your home state of Tennessee, in Athens, there was a corrupt legal system and a corrupt system in Athens, Georgia. Athens, Tennessee, back in post-World War II era, and the military veterans that lived in that area took up arms against the government, and even explosives. They used dynamite to get these guys to surrender because they had gotten in a gunfight.
Wow.
And they literally overthrew the local government by force with weapons of war, and no one was ever prosecuted for that. It was a legal act for them to. It became a legal act, I guess, in the sense that they won.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah.
But in reality, they were breaking the laws of the area and of the United States. Taking firearms. They took firearms from a National Guard armory, which is theft, and they shot at people, which is attempted murder.
Yep.
And they used explosives without a license. And these are all things that they've done that no one's ever been prosecuted for. And I think it's important for us to point out that again, just because it's legal doesn't make it moral.
Right. Exactly.
And just because it's illegal doesn't make it immoral.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's legal to to drink a gallon of Jack Daniels, but you're probably going to die.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another big one, is all the laws that are just out there just to protect us from ourselves, because of and also laws that are in place to basically legislate culture. That's another thing. A lot of these laws, I don't want to get into too specifics, because some of that gets kind of controversial and stuff. But there's a lot of laws out there that their sole purpose is just to keep certain culture norms in place, and really have nothing to do with like keeping people safer at all.
Well, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's just crazy. Well, I appreciate having you on, man, and we'll definitely do it again sometime for sure.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate it. And if you ever get out to Tennessee or something, man, you have to stop by.
Yeah, I will for sure. Definitely.
Well, I appreciate it, and then you guys can check out the link to his YouTube channel in the description, and we'll talk to you next time. I appreciate it.
All right, bye-bye.